This company makes it easy for developers to work with centimeter-level location to build the API for precise location, enabling safer cars, robots, and devices. Welcome to One Navigation, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's interview, we have Aaron Nathan, founder and CEO at the startup solving the navigation problems of the future. So welcome, Aaron. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining Builder Nation today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been working in robots pretty much my entire career. I co-founded the DARPA Current Challenge team back in university days at Cornell. That was kind of the genesis point for a lot of what we see today in self-driving. I had a short stint in academia, thought I wanted to become a professor, but then came out to Silicon Valley, joined a startup that was working on military positioning, learned a lot about that and saw that there was amazing potential for this kind of technology. Fast forward about 10 years later, the technology finally became low cost enough, and a lot of the things that we were working on in research were becoming commercial opportunities. So we saw a big need for this kind of technology and started point one to really make it easy, like you said, for developers to be able to take advantage of a lot of the work that we had built over that last decade. And so that brings us here.
Wow. Thank you so much for that interesting background. So you started back in 2016.
That's
and
right.
How was the industry like back then?
It was definitely exciting. There was a lot of people that were very, we'll say, bullish on autonomous vehicles, and that, by 2020, no one's going to have a car anymore, and it's all going to be robot taxis and everything. And I think maybe people were a bit optimistic in this problem, how hard it is to solve. But ultimately, a lot of amazing things have happened. And you start to see now the leaders in that space are actually making some of these autonomous vehicles have the start of their function. You see the Waymo cars and the cars from Cruise here in San Francisco driving around. It's extremely impressive. But there's still a long way to go to having individuals have their own car that drives them to work when they're sleeping or something. My focus has always been to say that before we go solve that problem, there's all kinds of other things that robotics can solve that are really, really valuable. And so point one really is designed to help the companies working on those, what I call like near-term autonomy problems that are generally much more focused. Could say the problem is easier, but that's not really the point. It's more that the problem is more focused. And so this allows to build a real business, deliver an actual valuable proposition to the customers who are using whatever that robotic system might be.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was actually my next question, because I know that you are like working or solving problems for different industries like automotive and mobility. But I was actually going to ask you about robotics. What would you say it's the biggest challenge there, or like the hardest integration?
I would say the hardest thing in robotics is dealing with uncertainty. So what do I mean by this? Whenever you and I are in the world and we're trying to walk around or like go get a coffee, you're constantly dealing with information that's maybe not perfectly clear. And this is very different for computers. Computers are used to having hard rules, and they can say, okay, if this, do this. What we're doing in the physical world is always kind of what we call like inference, trying to understand, like, do I believe this is true? And there maybe is a probability associated with that. What I'm saying in a long-winded way is that dealing with incomplete information makes it very, very difficult to make robotics that actually work. And this is why you'll see a robot car get confused by something that a human is like, well, obviously that's wrong. That's so hard to kind of encode into traditional computer languages. And so machine learning and all these other tools have really helped and revolutionized that piece of it, but it's still far from the levels that humans can do. And I think this is why having better sensors reduces that amount of uncertainty and allows robots to get closer to really being able to know what's going on. So whether it's in location like what we do, or whether it's using advanced LiDAR and radar and these other kind of sensors for perception, basically a clearer picture makes it easier for robots to make the right decision. And that's really what we're trying to enable across a whole wide variety of applications.
What do you think point one is the next big company in tech? What makes it different?
I think one of the most amazing things is that location is one of those things that is extremely important to all kinds of different applications, whether it's robotics or even just logistics, like getting you your package or your Chinese food takeout. And so The amount of different applications that location can touch and really revolutionize is almost unbounded. And it's a place that there hasn't been a tremendous amount of innovation when you look at it compared to things like LiDARs and radars that are doing perception. Like location technology is basically the same stuff that I used 20 years ago in the Grand Challenge. I think it is a less obvious problem for sure, but it is so valuable because it's kind of the starting point. Like location is something you and I take for granted because our brains are just so good at it. But for all those reasons I talked about before, robotics, if they can have a really clear understanding of where they are in the world, they can make way better decisions about what to do and how to act safely. That's why I think what we're doing is so valuable.
So what will you say has changed in the industry?
I think globally in the industry, people always talk of this hype cycle where everyone's super excited about everything and the world is going to change in 5 years. And I think we went through a little bit of this trough where people started to maybe have more realistic expectations around how hard some of these problems are. But I think what's happened is it's really focused. A lot of where people are spending energy and frankly also where people are investing dollars and time on applications that we can truly solve. We see companies that are doing commercial lawn mowing, as an example, on golf course. Maybe it's not revolutionary in terms of solving world hunger or something. It really does make for an application that makes good business sense. And I think those are the kinds of things that we'll see a lot more companies kind of figure out. And then we get to be kind of the tool that those companies use to build their products quickly and efficiently and safely. So ultimately, that's the big trend, this focusing on applications we can truly solve and deliver value. That's, as an industry, one of the biggest, frankly, welcome improvements over the last years.
Aaron, you're the founder, CEO, but you're an engineer by heart.
Yes.
How close are you with the engineers and how's your day-to-day like? Is it more on the business side right now, or do you still get really close with the engineers and all the hardware and software deliveries and stuff like that?
I am very close. I don't know that I'll ever be able to give up being really close with engineering. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe not. That's my team. I think that it's really important. Our customers are generally engineers. I believe to build the best product, you have to really understand your customer. And so I think to get separated from that would actually be a big mistake. And it's a lot of the reason that our customers do love us is that we think about not just how do you build location, but how do you do it for people solving the kinds of problems that our customers are solving. You could say we speak their language. That's really one of our biggest differences from the multi-billion-dollar companies we compete with. And I think it's an identity thing that is really important to us, that we always want to be that engineering first kind of company.
And talking on the marketing side, how hard it was to find a product market fit, especially in 2016, probably the market was totally all over the place, right?
We had the little bit of, I would say, advantage of being in research and understanding kind of what was the cutting edge. And I think in any startup, you always want to be on the cutting edge, but not too far ahead that it's too early and there's no market. But also if you're too late, then these big companies eventually are just going to use their scale to crush you. I think a sweet spot where you want to kind of be able to predict in the near term where the market is going. And we were able to, I'd say, use our experience of knowing what was coming. And we had definitely some luck of being at least close to right on when some of the real applications of this technology would come out. From the beginning, we were skeptical of what people were promising in the whole full robotaxi world. And I think the challenge with robotics is that it's, I'm not going to say easy, but it's much easier to build something that works 90% of the time. The problem with something like a self-driving car is it literally has to work 100% of the time. And it's a big challenge to build things that are that reliable. And I think this is really one of the big wake-up calls is that last 10% taking 90% of the time, that whole story. It's really, really true in things like critical robotic systems.
I wanted to ask you, I know that you guys are mostly software, but I found really interesting the fact that you also manufacture hardware. Yes. So how does that integration like and how does it actually work?
The hardware is definitely a necessary part of robotics. It's kind of the atoms that ultimately make it robotics, right? So it's software that integrates into the real world. And so what we found was that The software is really, I would say, the unique part of our business and what sets us apart in terms of performance. The hardware made it easy for customers to get all of those benefits, because at the end of the day, robotics is a big integration challenge. So if you have to go and do a whole lot of work to build hardware just to use someone's software, that creates friction and it makes it harder for customers to adopt any such, whether it's ours or the perception stack or anything. So again, in the spirit of building things that help our customers, we found that the hardware was a huge enabler. It just allowed them to get going so much faster and not have to deal with debugging all kinds of different circuits and sensors and all these things. The other side of it, I will say, is that we found that there were a lot of really healthy partnerships that came out of working with hardware vendors. We just actually made an announcement with one of our GPS chipset vendors. We are in this program that we work with them and we make their hardware roughly like 100 times more accurate by using part of our solution. And this is a really big marketing and sales funnel for us. The same thing goes with manufacturers of IMUs, manufacturers of all kinds of different sensors that we use in our platform. So I would say that the hardware is absolutely necessary. It is definitely a difficult thing to do, but the value that it delivers to our customers makes it worth it.
Was it hard in order to find the first partnership or like other company that was interested in working?
I would say that there was an existing kind of relationship that we were able to leverage. We had come to the table with something that was unique because the software we had, it makes the hardware look awesome. That's really the way to think of it.
Yeah.
Our partners are these hardware companies who build like sensors. And then what we do is we take those sensors, we integrate them together and we make them produce something that the developers actually want. And so actually we're kind of helping our hardware partners make their products look even better by applying the smart software and services that we build on top. So in that way, I would say that the hardware companies were actually very excited to work with us. Now, yes, the first ones are hard to convince when you have nothing, but we're able to leverage the reputation that we had as a team and building all these robotics vehicles and everything from the beginning. And people gave us a chance to show what we could do.
So one of the last questions that I wanted to ask you, Aaron, where do you think the future of the industry is going?
The big thing is that the industry is growing up. So what we're starting to see is, I would say the last couple of years, there's a lot of excitement and maybe some would argue too much excitement with it getting harder to raise venture capital money and all these kinds of effects. It's actually helping businesses focus on things that are actually good businesses. That means solving problems that people are willing to pay to solve. And I actually think this is really healthy because it makes it so that we're working on problems that are actually helpful. Otherwise, it's kind of like academia where it might be cool. I should write a paper or something, but who's buying it? And so this is a really important step because it helps take the technology and be very honest about what its capabilities are, and then match that with applications that can actually use that technology in a way that is helpful. And I think this is also why in the market you're seeing focus on things like agricultural type of applications or surveying and what they call like photogrammetry type of applications where you're building like 3D models of things, and other things like in logistics and delivery where you can increase the efficiency of delivering packages, and that obviously turns into increasing the efficiency of an operations business. And then like on the vehicle side, you're seeing now the automotive companies focus more on how do we build safer cars that have what I call narrow autonomy so that they can have some degree of assistance on the highway. They're not fully autonomous, but they actually make it so that the driving function is much safer and it's much more convenient. And, you know, you're much less likely to get into an accident driving on the highway. And at the end of the day, this is one of the most valuable things that we can do. It might not make as cool a headline as this car driving itself with no one in it, but you're looking at like over 25,000 people a year being killed in car crashes. make a dent in that by, ultimately just working on building safer systems out of the technology we have today. So a lot of the car companies we work with, that's actually where their focus is. And I think that's really smart.
Okay, so last but not least, do you have any advice for future entrepreneurs or people starting on this path?
I think the biggest thing is that focus on what customers actually want. If you build something just because it's interesting, but it doesn't really necessarily have an application, that's not a business. I think ultimately this is really important to think about. And I think the faster that you can get customers to understand what you're doing and why it helps them solve some problem that's important to them, the better it is for anyone building a company, building a product. It's that feedback, and nothing is more valuable. And I think that's something that we've learned and we try to keep in our minds as we develop new products, to think about, okay, how do we make sure that what we're building is actually what the customer wants?
Great piece of advice. Thank you so much for taking the time. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you, or Point One?
So our website is point1nav.com. We are on all kinds of social media, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all at Point1Nav. And by all means, we encourage developers building anything interesting to check out our website. And we offer all kinds of easy to use development hardware that they can get started with and really take advantage of the years of technology that we've built to basically get started fast.
Great. You heard that, guys. So please make sure to check their website. And remember, guys, to find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one with Aaron, directly on our website, ControlHub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Aaron, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, for joining the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Elisa. Appreciate it.